We're going to be talking about Autodesk Construction Cloud, otherwise known as Build or BIM360 or lots of other names. Even in this presentation title, when I originally made it, I called it BIM360/Build, and neither one of those are actually accurate anymore. So it's Autodesk Construction Cloud and how we're using it in construction. So with that, for those of you who don't know me, I'll give you a little bit of background on myself. For those of you who do know me, maybe there's something in here you didn't know. Started on the architectural side, worked there for years. My dad's an architect, so got into it from a very young age. My dad's an architect, my mom's an IT professional, so I merged the two and became a construction nerd. I started doing 3D modeling, stuff like that, renderings, pretty pictures. As I started getting old, BIM started coming onto the field. I started working on some of those with federal government jobs. Focused a lot on the coordination between the different design trades and then taking it to the construction trades. So lots of design build work, IPD type projects in my past. Lots of schools, federal government, state government, things like that kind of facilities as well. I moved to the construction side, or the dark side, back in 2015. Joined ACI, if you've worked with them. I was in their detailing BIM department and oversaw their switch from Siskiyou, which is now a Trimble-owned add-on to Revit for construction parts, and switched over to the MEP fabrication parts, which is much more where Revit's gone anyway, so it worked out well. And then I joined Barton Malow about 5 years ago. My role here, I'm a VDC manager, so I oversee all of the projects in Virginia, plus a few outside. Like I've got one in Denver that's a new hospital. I'm going to be going out there in a couple of weeks again to do another site visit with them. We're actually going to be testing out GeoSlam, if you've ever seen that. Kind of cool to check that out. And that's one of my big areas that I like to focus on, is the physical to virtual and virtual to physical reactions. So whether that's, being able to capture something that's in the real world with drones and laser scans and stuff like that and put it into the virtual world for other people, or whether it's taking the virtual world and getting it back out to the physical world, augmented reality, any way of getting people involved in models and taking all this stuff we're doing in the design, the coordination, all that kind of stuff, and taking all that stuff and getting it out to the field, because we don't want to do all that work and then nothing happens. So those are kind of my big areas. There's a photo of me that's a couple years old, but it's better than the one where I had my big long beard. For anyone who saw that, that was my COVID beard. Grew it out for 2 years, and it looked like a dead animal on my face on the best of days. So that being said, I am probably going to blast through this. If at any point you're confused, you have a question, whatever, please feel free to stop me. I'm totally fine with that. I may say I'll come back to that, but other than that, please feel free to stop me, tell me to slow down, whatever. Got a couple of different topics here. These are based off of the bullet points that we published with this meeting invite. I kind of reordered them a little bit and renamed them a little bit, but so we're going to talk a little bit about the alphabet soup of all of the Autodesk Cloud stuff and its huge pile of confusion. To kind of continue that and further muddy the waters, we're going to be talking about what the different products, modules, and tools are, and what's currently out there, what we're using, and how they all kind of work together. Trust me, hopefully for the people I've talked to, the analogies I have for that make it a whole lot better. And that's really where I was kind of hoping Matt Conrad or somebody else from Autodesk would be able to make sure I'm not going too far off the rails. Then I want to spend a little bit of time talking about some of the cool tools that are in the Autodesk Construction Cloud, and not just for construction. Like anyone using it can use most of these tools. There's some great stuff in there. And then the last thing is actually going to be a little bit of our process, and it's going to be more live drives. So it's funny, we can do it quick, we can take longer, whatever. I've got some stuff. Crud, I rebooted and I forgot to open my file. So we'll take a break before then. But anyway, that's the plan moving forward. So the history. Oh, the history. If you've been using Autodesk cloud-based services for a while, you know that it's been there for a while and they've changed names like every 6 months, it feels like. My recollection and what I could find online is basically it started out as like Autodesk Docs, and then it kind of renamed to A360 Docs. And at that point, it was really geared more towards like the AutoCAD files and design team sharing and stuff like that. Then, Autodesk, there's the Autodesk Docs. And then it went to A360, so we started to see that. And then Autodesk really was like, oh man, cloud is where it's going. We got to get on this. So they started to come up with the BIM360 suite of apps, design, glue, build, field, ops. And they were all individual apps that you could get, and they kind of worked together, and they really only worked on the iPad, and they weren't all that awesome, and it is what it is. So Autodesk kind of realized that big disparate pieces didn't work well. They kind of regrouped, and that's when they came out with the unified BIM360 platform. It's been around for a few years now. It's got all the little modules you can buy in it or activate in your accounts or whatever. But it really took it from being separate silos of software apps to one combined with a unified platform underneath. And then, of course, just because people weren't confused enough, Autodesk decided to, instead of continuing BIM 360 or BIM 360 2.0 or whatever, they renamed it the Autodesk Construction Cloud, or ACC. And then there's subparts like Build, which is a lot of what we're going to be talking about. And then they renamed things like the local drive, if you're using Desktop Connector, as Autodesk Docs. And so there's like 500 names for the same thing. And that's where it really starts to get confusing, because Autodesk Construction Cloud is like the whole big umbrella of all of their cloud-based services for construction-related stuff, building construction. So if I'm using Build and you're using Design Collaboration, well, what's the difference, right? So that's what we're going to get into next. But first, yes, soup for you. Basically, there is a way that Autodesk has worked it so that they've got these little packages and stuff that works for everybody. At least that's their thought. So it does really kind of get confusing, so we're going to kind of break it up. And the idea, if you start to think of it as like these modules and these tools that we're going to be talking about as ingredients, it kind of helps break things up, because you can have multiple recipes with the same ingredient, or you can even get the same menu item from multiple restaurants. It's not going to be the same, but it has the same ingredients. So keep that in mind. Back it up a second. So within the Autodesk Construction Cloud, or ACC as we'll call it because that's just easier, there are several sections, and shown here on the left. I apologize, Project Admin is highlighted. So the first one is Docs, and basically if you're using anything ACC, you've got Docs. That's where they're keeping all the documents. That's really kind of like the basic foundation of everything else. Design collaboration is probably something more the people on this call might be familiar with. That's where you're going to be sharing your models, consume them, share them, that kind of stuff. I'm not getting into any of that. That's not what this is about. Next is the model coordination. That's supposed to be like replacing the glue / maybe kind of aiming at Navisworks, but it's not there. It's missing some very absolutely fundamental keys for someone as detailed in clash detection as what we do here at Barton Mallow. It's missing some critical functionality. Is it good for design? Is it good for early coordination, stuff like that? Yes, it is absolutely better than nothing. But it's missing things like search sets and doing clearance coordination so that you can stay 2 inches off the steel, because nobody ever models the fireproofing on steel. Things like that aren't there yet. So it's good. It's got its place. If you're using it in design to like help you, make sure that you're constructible before we get to construction, awesome. Please do. For us on the construction side, it's not there yet. So next is takeoff. If you've used Assemble, QTO back in the day, anything like that, this is really what's taken that over. It's one of the newer tools. They're like Autodesk bought Assemble a few years ago. They're folding that in. So it's kind of work in progress. But the idea is there. We've been using Assemble here at Barton Mallow for years. We love it. Our estimators are on board with doing that. So we're hoping it's going to be a pretty easy transition as we kind of ramp up more of our pre-con into build. That's been one of our key efforts in the last like 6 months or so, is getting our pre-construction team into build, so that things like contract negotiations and constructability reviews and quantity takeoffs and scheduling and all that stuff is getting in there before we're ever even mobilizing on site. And a lot of that really kind of feeds into some of our processes later on. So I'm getting ahead of myself. Next is build. That's the one we're going to be talking about the most here, because that's obviously what we're talking about. Construction. This is going to have all the stuff for building the building, your RFIs, your submittals, drawing logs, specs, all that kind of jazz. So we're going to spend some time in there today. Next is Insight. We'll touch on this a little bit too. This is really kind of what, if you've used BIM360, the homepage that you could like customize your dashboard and look at stuff, that's all in Insights now. But there's also other dashboards that are already like pre-made and are more project consistent, so that people can kind of share those. So it's got some good stuff for, that's more management level. If you're really looking for kind of those visual representations of what's our risk level, you know, where do we stand on our RFIs, you know, that kind of stuff, Insight's your place to go. Next is project admin. Only going to see it if you are a project admin. So if you're not such a project admin, you won't ever see it. But you know, if you are a project admin, there a couple of the big things in here obviously is membership, who's in the project, what's their role, stuff like that. There's lots and lots. I could spend a whole presentation on that. But it's all access control related. So there's that. One of the other big things in there is the locations, which I'll kind of talk about a little bit, but basically it's a database of like, these are all the different rooms, spaces, areas, however you want to break it up, that we're going to be linking stuff to. So it's just a big database of rooms. Usually what I'll end up doing is I actually make a room schedule in a copy of the design architect's model, and I take that room schedule, export it, and bring it into build, and that's my location list, at least to start with. I'll add things like north facade, east facade, things like that that aren't going to be on that room list, but that's builds out 99% of it right there. Last is account admin. Again, most people won't see this unless you are the account admin. This is going to be things like your project templates, cross-project dashboards. There's a lot of that we've been seeing, and our senior management loves that stuff because they're able to pull dashboards that are, hey, across all of our projects, how are we doing with RFIs? Okay, we're looking okay. Maybe there's a few projects over here that are not so great. So it gives them a really high-level look from the account admin level. And that is, because of that, we've been finding a lot of issues with, like, you know, if design teams want us to join their BIM360 or Build site, or things like that, we're like, no, we really kind of need to be on our own because we have all of our templates set up. It's data reporting out of it. It's all the reasons that the owners say, we're using eBuilder, so you will use eBuilder too. Sit. But you know, it's all the same things. Like, we've developed workflows and accountability processes and stuff like that that really only work if the project team is in our build project. So with that, we've had some issues with common data environment requirements and stuff like that, but we'll get into that. There's a cool tool for that. I think there's progress being made there. So these are the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 9 different possible products, subsections, whatever you want to call them, within ACC. So I kind of mentioned my analogies earlier. So if you think of cloud-based storage and administration of projects, pick what kind of cuisine do you want? You want American? Do you want Chinese? Do you want Mexican? What are we in the mood for? Well, we're in America, so we're going to go American, okay? So we want hamburgers. Okay, well, there's lots of places we can go to get a hamburger, right? All of these different products will give me a hamburger. The question is, what ingredients are in those hamburgers? You know, this one's got lettuce and tomato, that one's got ketchup and mustard, this one's got cheese, that one doesn't, whatever. So to kind of explain that a little bit more, let's dive in a little bit into within Build. Okay, so this is my typical project. We're, we're based off of the build module, but obviously there's some other parts in here. So we have 4 main sections we're going to talk about. Docs, which, like I said, is your foundational stuff. So that's going to be like your bun, if you want to think of it that way. Every hamburger has a bun, right? Unless you're doing some weird lettuce wrap or whatever. They all have them. You're going to have bread. It is what it is. The build is really going to be the meat. This is where all of your production happens. This is where things are going to be shared, whatever. A lot of these sections are going to overlap. If you're doing design collaboration, model coordination, whatever, you're probably going to have some of these same features and ingredients, basically, like the meetings tool, progress tracking, scheduling. I don't use those tools, but I imagine those or very, very similar tools are available for you guys. So from there, we've got kind of the insights, which again is the dashboards, the pretty pictures. So that's going to be your toppings and whatever you want to put on it to kind of make it pretty and make it just the right flavor for you. And then, of course, we've got the admin. That's, we'll call that the pickle or whatever. And this again, it's very administrative related. There is, and this is kind of where the ingredients thing gets a little weird. So Bridge is specifically mentioned under project administration. And Bridge is a tool we're going to talk a bit more about later, but it actually appears in every single module. It is that fundamental. I think it actually is more of a docs thing, but I threw it under administration just because I didn't have much else under there. And like I said, it shows up in every category. So I'm going to do a live drive with BIM360 or with Build in a bit. But basically, if you've used BIM360 in the past or Build or any of the other ACC products, kind of in that upper left-hand corner of your screen, you'll get the little box and you can switch to the different modules. And that's what these are. These are the 4 modules that we basically just have for our projects now. We do on occasion pull in some of the other ones like the model collaboration, stuff like that, but they're pretty rare. So in terms of like what's available in each of these modules, does anyone have any questions? I'm going to talk about some of these in more detail, but not everything. So does anyone have any questions? Have I put you all to sleep? Am I talking to the wall?
No questions so far.
All right.
Yeah, it'll be good to see the live feed. So for those of us who are not, haven't seen these features yet.
Yes. Yeah, we're going to get into that. But first, I'm going to bore you to death with slightly more PowerPoint. All right, so moving on, I mentioned some of those tools. Some of the big ones, which are going to be pretty standard, whether you're on the design side or the construction side, whether you're in Build, BIM360, or Procore, or whatever, there's going to be certain things every project's going to have. RFIs, submittals, things like that. They're going to be handled somehow. Obviously, ACC has ways of dealing with that. The thing that I really kind of like about ACC is the issues feature, though, which is not always common in everything else. Basically, this is replacing the old like email or talking to somebody and being like, hey, what's going on over here? It's replacing that in a very virtual world, but with also a lot of the documentation. So the way I like to look at the issues is like it wants to grow up and be an RFI or die. Like that's it. Either it gets closed and resolved and everyone's happy and no one ever needs to see it again, or it grows up, becomes an RFI and a bigger issue. And that's dependent upon, what are the answers, who needs to get involved, how official is the response, that sort of thing. And I'm going to specifically talk more to issues and how they relate to RFIs and stuff later, but issues are basically kind of like, hey, question, what's going on here? Flag it as an issue. There can be 8,000 issues and nobody's going to care. But they're basically an RFI without the seriousness. Think about it that way. So a lot of the same stuff, linking data, assigning people, start dates, due dates, that kind of stuff, all applies to issues just like they would to an RFI, but obviously it's not as mission critical. And then, like I said, they can be pushed up and actually made into an RFI, so all the documentation, the history, things like that are all kept and don't have to be recreated. So some nice stuff there. And although I didn't mention it in the issues, all the stuff under RFIs pretty much apply to, which is, you can tie it to sheets, you can tie it to markups, you can have people that are set just to watch it. So, for example, maybe it's an architectural issue, but it'll affect the plumber, but the plumber doesn't really have a decision to be made. So the RFI will be assigned to the architect, but then watched by the plumber. And then that way, you can be made aware of all those changes as it happens, as opposed to the standard, which is, more kind of a like overview emails, or like a lot of it's set to daily, where it's like, hey, here's all of the RFIs that came in today. Okay, great. But if you have specific ones you want to watch, or specific ones certain people want to watch, they can be added as watchers, which is really nice. And then one of the other really cool things is you can do custom approval processes, and that also applies to submittals. So whether it's a single person approves it and then it's done, or like there's a two-stage approval, maybe the architect approves it, or the design team approves it, kicks it back, then the GC's got to approve it before it finally goes to the trades. Whatever it is, there's options in there for that. Same with submittals. I've actually used submittals within BIM360, although it's basically exactly the same, to actually do a sign-off for a coordination area. So normally what we would do is send out a PDF that says, hey, here's our area, here's the NWD file that references it, everyone sign and say you're happy. We still did that, but rather than sending out a PDF that was like DocuSigned or whatever, we were able to do it through the BIM360 process. And it wasn't awesome. There's some workflow improvements we could definitely do there, but it's a viable workflow for sure. It's just one that we didn't feel was worth the squeeze at this point for just model coordination sign-off. Certainly all of our normal, construction submittals go through that process, and it works really well. One of the things we've also used, I mentioned Autodesk has bought up a ton of other programs and stuff like that to kind of incorporate it. One of the ones they've done is Pype, P-Y-P-E. And we love using Pype for two reasons. It's spec creation, so it actually will create your submittal log. It'll break your specs out. It ties into the project, or the overall project manual. So it's got some nice, just kind of document management tools with it. But the other thing is, lately they've added another tool for closeout, so that it really helps kind of combine all that stuff into closeout. And ACC's also got something they're working on for closeout, but it's still new. So prior to that, the Pype closeout was a really good tool. So we'll see how the Build one comes along. One of the biggest benefits within the Build BIM environment is the transparency with limits, I think. I kind of mentioned before within the project management, you handle everything between the username, you can assign them to a company, and then you assign them to a role. And so with those three pieces of information, name, company, and role, that's how you assign all the permissions within anywhere of ACC. So if you say anybody within architecture company can access this folder, new people come on, you assign them to that company, they automatically get access to that folder. If there's stuff that's like, hey, these are Barton Mallow files, we don't want outside people to see these are internal contracts or whatever, we can limit that to say only Barton Mallow people can access that. Same with the role. Project team, field team, design team, we use a lot of those kinds of terms in there. And so then that way, again, instead of having to be like, I have to tag the architect and the engineer or the MEP engineer and the structural engineer, and you just say, give me the design team, and they all have access to it. So it's a really nice way of being able to quickly and easily manage access, but all of the data is in there that the project admins and account admins can access. So if there's ever a dispute, if there's ever a question, if there's a, hey, when did that happen? Who said this? Whatever, it's all documented. Nothing ever gets lost. At least that's my understanding. Even if you delete something in ACC, technically it still kind of exists in the background, but only like AutoCAD, the Autodesk people, like tech people, can get to it for tech support stuff. So the last thing is, one of the biggest benefits is doing an all-in approach. It's hard for a lot of companies to do that because obviously this is a big change. But we have found those teams who try and halfway go to something like a BIM360 or ACC do not do well. They really don't. They struggle with just about everything. The whole system is streamlined to work with itself. So the more you can keep within that little bubble, the easier it is. As soon as you start going out of it, like Navisworks is technically outside the bubble, it starts to create additional work and issues, depending on exactly what you're doing. So the more you can keep inside of that, there's definite benefits to that, but it doesn't work for everything. All right, so next I'm going to jump into some cool new tools, but I want to take a breath real quick, ask any questions so far, anything specific maybe you want me to make sure I cover when we get to the live drive part of it?
I just jumped into my ACC to confirm that the control for access, that's at the folder level, not the file level, right?
Either or.
Either or, okay.
Yeah. It's really like every level has its own access. And so like you can set this folder to be accessible by the architect, and they're going to get everything underneath no matter what. But you can assign it to like the whole project team has access to this, but then this subfolder only the architect has access to, or only, you know, the field team or whatever. And so you can do it by file, you can do it by folder, however you want to do it. The default is by folder. And like I said, every child folder and file gets the permissions of the one above, but you can actually set them per folder. I want to say per file, but even with that, you can share that even outside of your project. That the sharing link is a little bit weird, and that is actually one of the things I'm not crazy about ACC, is because if you're sharing a link outside of the project, and this is that all-in thing, if you're sharing a link to somebody outside of Build, you can do that so long as it's turned on at the project admin level. But that link is going to expire. It has a guaranteed it's going to expire. The default is like 2 weeks, but I want to say the maximum you can set it to right now is 60 days. So if you're trying to set a link that you want permanent or for a long time for somebody to go to, or it's going to get updated, whatever it is, you have to keep regenerating that link every couple of months, which is really annoying. But it is possible to share individual files, individual folders using those links to people inside and outside of the project. I want to say, though, even if they're outside of the project, they're still going to need an Autodesk account just so they can like log in, but they don't need to be assigned to your project at all. So there's that. Good question. Anything else? Going once, going twice. Moving on to the cool new tools. All right, so first of all, I want to talk about not so cool meeting minutes. Woo! Everybody loves meeting minutes, right? I'll tell you, these are the easiest meeting minutes I've ever done. They organize very easily. They have the ability to transfer, statuses. When you're done with the meeting, any open items automatically get shifted to the meeting minutes for the next meeting. And these meeting minutes get closed out, so they're kind of locked in place. It does attendance, it does links, it does attached files. It's really pretty straightforward. And the best part is it's all on the Build site. So if somebody misses a meeting, if whatever, then they can go on there and get the meeting minutes, and they don't have to dig through folders to find it. So it becomes really easy to be able to share that information, or if you're not part of a meeting because it's not part of your purview, but they talked about something important to you, you can pull up those meeting minutes, assuming it's made available to you. So again, it's just one of those really nice communication tools. It's pretty streamlined, pretty slick, not a ton of bells and whistles, but it's definitely a benefit over, somebody typing it in Word or handwriting it and sending it out later in email. This way it's done. Again, hopefully during the meeting, you can have somebody who's dedicated to just running that while somebody else is doing the, talking about the coordination or whatever the actual issues are. And then again, you can tie it to specific other parts of build or ACC rather, whether that's an issue, an RFI, a sheet, whatever. The next thing is schedule. This is hands down my favorite tool in ACC. Not because it's functionally useful in terms of like being able to set the schedule or anything like that. Quite the opposite. You can't change anything in it. The intent of the schedule tool is to allow the project management team who's working in P6 or Microsoft Project or whatever they're using to be able to take that schedule and push it out to where other people can see it. Traditionally, at least on the construction side, we've done that through a PDF. Usually we'll do a couple that are like the whole schedule, and then we'll do like a 2-week look ahead, something like that. And the problem with that is, one, it's all 11 by 17 pages, and it's all text. I can't filter, I can't search, I can't sort, I can't do anything. So it's really limiting in what the end user of that PDF can do with it. The other, plus, if somebody's not looking at the most recent one, then obviously they've got another problem there, which is a whole issue we've had in the world of construction and everything and design. I'm sure you guys have seen that, where you're like, why are you looking at this drawing from 3 months ago? We've issued 3 new updates since then. Same thing with the schedule. We've seen that plenty of times. So this allows for that single source of truth. The other great thing about the schedule feature is it's got a suggestions tool. So if I'm looking at the schedule, in this case, I've got it filtered down on this project to my BIM schedule. If I'm looking at this and I'm going, oh man, we're coming up on the sign-off date for underground, and I know for a fact we've got some issues here, and we're not going to be able to make that. Okay, I can make a suggestion. It gets sent to the administrative team that says, hey, we need to push this date back, whatever, or we can pull it forward, or whatever that suggestion is. So it gives, like, again, that single source of everyone can go there. They can put their notes on the same thing. They can see other people's notes, and it provides that single source of truth. Plus, again, filtering, sorting, being able to, scroll across your Gantt chart and be able to see it a little bit easier. Like, all of that stuff is all built into this, but you can't change anything. So all the project team has to do is they export like a CSV, or I forget the exact file format, and they import it into Build, and that's all they do. They update it every 2 weeks or however often they're updating the schedule, and it's done. It's super easy. It dramatically increases the functionality to a large part of the team, so that is why it's like my favorite tool of all time. So highly recommend it. I really hope it's on the build or on the design side of things. If it's not, talk to Autodesk, see if you guys can get that too, because I imagine you guys are pretty schedule driven too, with deliverables and stuff like that. So moving on. Next tool I want to talk about is asset tracking. Again, not very pretty. Most of the stuff isn't. It's document management. But the goal of the assets module is to be able to pull the equipment data out of the models. Just like I was saying I did with the locations, I make a report and I export it. Kind of the same thing with the equipment. But then once we have that list, we can start tracking additional information for it, whether that's what's its status, is it ordered, is it submitted, is it delivered, whatever. So this starts getting to more of the on-site management. But the real benefit of this is, as we're building this, as we're, we've got this pump that's come in, it's brand new, we haven't installed it yet, we can go ahead and take a picture of the nameplate, for example. We can attach that to the piece of equipment so that once it's installed, if we can't easily get to that nameplate, well, it's already done. We don't have to wait until after it's installed to gather the information we need for the owner. That's really where this benefits from. There's two main reasons to use assets. One is construction progress tracking. We can use it for where is it in the laydown area? Is it over at our alternative storage area? Where is this piece of equipment at in the process? But then also, where is it once it's installed? It's in this room, it's, whatever. So We use it through the design or through the construction part of it to start adding some of our data, but the real benefit comes when we hand that off to the owner, because it starts to become that single source of information for maintenance. One of the things that this has too is like checklists, and we can add real world data into it. So like photos, barcodes, PDF manuals. We can link to commissioning and maintenance checklists. So, how to properly start up a piece of equipment, how to shut it down, what sort of maintenance is required. And that gets more advanced than most of our clients are asking for. But we do have some clients out there, Penn State's a perfect example, where they want this on every job. They know what they want. They know how they're going to use it. They use it, and you better have it. And on other projects I've worked on with them, if we try and wait until construction's even, 50% done before we start tracking this data, we're going to miss a ton of it. So this is really geared towards getting that data before it gets to the owner. So that's kind of the big part of that.
And can I ask, does that also interface with other management systems that owners may have, or does that require the owner to then be in the Autodesk product?
So that's kind of a loaded question, because directly, no, it does not. But the intent with this is at the end of the project, and like I said, Autodesk kind of been working on a closeout tool. It's working on gathering up all that data and then saying, okay, what is your CMS tool, your or management tool that the owners are using, so that we can put it in that right format. That's still very much a work in progress. I can't guarantee it's ever going to work. It's probably going to be per company is going to figure out their own ways of doing things for each project and each client, and the ways we've always done things. But the intent is, yes, it will push out to that system. That's the end goal, is all this data would end up over there. That help?
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. I put a little note on this one. This picture that I've got on the screen here is actually from a BIM360 project that we're using assets on. Build is so new that we don't have any projects currently that are both big enough that we're warranting the need for tracking the assets this way. That's already on Build. Most of our Build projects just haven't gotten that far yet. The last thing I want to talk about is Bridge, and this kind of goes back to some of the other things we were talking about. Like I said, Bridge is in pretty much every module, every tool, or every species of ACC you can get. And the intent of Bridge, from what I understand, is to be the automated file transfer. So, I mentioned, we need to be in our own ACC environment because of our processes, data tracking, things like that. But obviously the design team has theirs. Every once in a rare while, we have an owner that has theirs. And the way Bridge is supposed to work is those automated file transfers that are, for the design team, you guys are using design collaboration for your consuming and sharing models. It's kind of like that for everybody else. So whether the design team is sending the construction team models on a weekly basis from a separate project, whether, we want to do weekly exports of certain logs so that we can do, background data tracking, like any kind of like automated file transfers is what this is really kind of set up for, or at least where it's headed towards. Again, it's one of the newest tools. It's still very much in development, so, still a lot to be learned there, but it definitely has some good potential to it. So definitely want to look out for that. So those are my cool tools. I'm going to pause this real quick while I get my project up and loaded. But while I'm doing that, does anyone have any questions? Going once, going twice.
Curious about the schedule thing.
Okay.
Wondering how I would, and maybe this is not a good time for this question, but I've gotten into my project admin area trying to figure out if it's available on for the build, but wondering if anyone else on the call knows. I know you said that you weren't sure.
Do you mean if it's available for the design side, for those of us that have, now I can't remember the name, collaboration, BIM360 collaboration
Yeah, that's what I mean. Mhm.
and coordination? I have not seen it.
And this is why I wish Matt was on the call right here.
Yeah.
Because he'd totally be like, oh yeah, I got you, man. So, yeah, it's, so if you do have it, so I was mentioning before, there's, you know, the different modules I mentioned. Sorry about that. I mentioned the different modules, docs, build, insight, project admin. So that's up here. You click on your little thing. These are your different like menus of options or menu items, I guess. So hopefully then once you get into there, it's down here on one of these sides. Again, you're not going to be under build. You're going to be under design collaboration, so it's different. But hopefully it's there. If not, talk to your reseller, talk to your Autodesk rep, talk to the knowledge network, you know, anyone you can, and make that request. So this is an actual live project we've got here. This is what I'm going to be using for my live drive anyway. And sorry, I just realized that Navisworks finally opened, so I just need to get it loading my software. Last one I opened anyway. So the nice thing too is you can actually have multiple schedules in here. So if you're working on a project that, you know, is maybe heavily phased or something like that, you can have, you know, hey, we're looking at what would happen if kind of schedules. And so you can have multiple schedules in here, and that way, again, like it's available for people depending on, you know, who needs it. And again, you can share, you can not share it. It's whatever. This one's obviously shared with all the different project project members. And again, we can manage access here. So if we actually dive into some of the settings, the attributes in here, we can see that, you know, we've actually got a fair bit of information in here, but we can actually turn on and off like what information is shown, like all of the dependencies and stuff like that is coming over. We use P6 mostly, so all that stuff is coming over. You know, if we wanted to show float, we can. Typically we don't. And then again, we come into here and we can say, okay, right now, anyone with admin levels can manage this, but anyone on the project can access it, is my understanding. And if they can't, then I need to fix that. Yeah. So who can access the schedule right now? It's all project members. I can set it to restricted, and then only the people in here can view it. So yeah, anyone on our project can view that right now without an issue. So it's pretty straightforward. And then, like I said, you know, we can come down in here, we can search it in different, you know, the Gantt charts, we can change that out. We can search by activities, filter, you know, all kind of stuff. So you really got a lot of really nice features in here. And then if I click on an individual task, just like we have on our P6 schedule or whatever you guys are using for your schedule, you know, in this case, we put an A at the end of our dates to indicate that it's an actual. So this is 100% complete. You know, all of the data that we're getting, what is its predecessor, what's its successor, all that stuff is getting pulled over. So I think it's a really nice, useful tool. Then I can add comments if I really wanted to. So with that, so there are two things I really kind of wanted to talk about in the live drive, and I can get more into the Navisworks side of things, which is going to be part of this. Make sure that works. Yes, cool. So I guess before I get into that, is there anything else build-wise, before I get into the process of things, is there anything else build-wise that you guys want to talk about? No, maybe. Hopefully I've bored you all to death.
Not at all.
Okay.
But no questions.
So, you know, the next part of what I want to talk about is like, how are we using this like in real world? Like, what is this in a project? So I'm going to actually come out of Build a little bit because from my perspective, for a lot of designers, a lot of what we're doing starts in the virtual world before we get to the PDFs and the prints and all that kind of stuff. Like, you model in Revit before you make a drawing, right? So let's take a look at it from a modeling perspective and kind of we're going to set the Wayback Dial back a few months, and we're going to assume that we're still or this started when we were still in design before we got issued for construction. So this is an actual project ongoing right now. If you understand my abbreviations, you might be able to identify this project, but it's really kind of a cool project outside of Richmond. Basically 4-story office lab building and a giant Faraday cage that's explosion proof because they're going to be testing a bunch of high voltage electrical equipment in there. HVL, high voltage lab. There you go. So within Navisworks, which again I kind of mentioned we still prefer to use over the Collaborate and some of the other tools because of some of the functionality, we do have the ability to tie into the issues within Build. It's not the best. Like I said, you're outside that little bubble, so there's some issues there, but it does work. It does track. It does update. There's some workarounds we got to do, but it works. So what I've got here is this is an NWD file because it only works with the NWDs, and but I update the NWD, so I'm getting the latest models. But what I did is right now I've got all my push pins shown. These are all of the issues that have been found in an NWD since we started this project. And the different colors denote their status. Orange is open, active, needs help. Blue is like in progress, I think, or something along those lines. I don't have many blues. Pending, that's what it is, yeah. Purple is in review, which means basically we've talked about it. We've got a solution. It just isn't resolved yet. And then the last one is closed out. So that's pretty obvious. Dang it, my model's moved. And this is, again, one of the problems we have with it is, so it's NWD specific, which is fine because you just replace the NWD and it doesn't care. But we had the model move after I published my first NWD, so you can see all my points out here are off into the south. So none of my photos are going to line up until I move the model again, so I apologize for that. But functionality-wise, that doesn't change anything. So we can access the issues, we can see them, we can do all that stuff, but how does that help us in a project? And the answer is, and this is part of why we want the design models, not because we're trying to slam the design team or call them out for stuff, but because we legitimately want to look at this project from as many angles as possible to try and find possible issues, possible RFIs, possible safety issues, whatever it is, maintenance issues, whatever. We want to try and identify those as early as possible so that if you think back to your old, I forget there's a name for it, but that chart that's like, the sooner you make a decision, the less it costs and the easier it is. That's the idea here. We're trying to push as many of these decisions as early into the design as possible. Again, not because we're trying to do your job for you or we're trying to tell you designers you're doing your job wrong, but because we're trying to make the best project we can. And the more people looking at things from different perspectives, the more likely you are to catch stuff. I apologize if anyone on this call is from the architect for this project or knows the architect on this project. I'm not going to bash them, but I am going to point out a few issues that were found, even though we're issued for construction on documents, just because it's part of this process. So as you can see, I've got quite a few issues in here. I'm actually going to jump to a few of them. So one is, let's see, was that one? Yeah, it's going to be that one. So right now we're only seeing the design model. We just started doing, but we've got the trades on board. They're starting the model. We do have models for them, but at this point we're looking at it as though like we're still in design or we just got issued for construction. So what we like to do, what I do in particular, is I'll go through the model and look for constructability issues, things that may be a problem when we get to building. For example, here, these pink things under these footings, these are called zone of influence boxes. Never seen one on a design team that I didn't put in, but they're dead useful when it comes to coordination, because 9 times out of 10, there's an area under that footing you can't touch. Don't disturb it. You undermine the footing. There's details for that in structural drawings. Structural detailers call it out, but it doesn't get into the model. So if people don't know about it, it may get missed. I've gotten bid on projects, and now I just go ahead with it and put it in there. In this case, we can see that even though in plan this pipe would miss that footing, it is right through that zone of influence, and there's no way that pipe can go there. So that got flagged as an issue. Put it in there. We sent it to the design team. I'm not going to blame, but there was some miscommunication there. The design team didn't either get or follow up on a bunch of these issues. So here we are, issue for construction is still there. So it was an open issue for months, didn't get resolved. At this point, we're past issue for construction. The design team's not going to change it. It's going to be on the trades and our trade coordination. So I changed the status from open to in review, which basically is just my way of designating these issues go to the trade coordination. The ones that are still going to be open, I need to talk with higher ups and other people on the project team to be like, this probably needs to be an RFI. So we're able to create these issues in Navisworks. As we get models, we update the models. We can come back, follow up on them, and check to see, is it being fixed? Is it not being fixed? Does it somebody else's responsibility? Whatever. Some issues, we'll bring up, and that is clearly not intended. There's a giant beam running across a giant overhead coiling door. Blocks the door. That's not an intention. That's going to get pushed to an RFI. That's not something a trade coordination could fix. Like, that needs to be RFI'd. So I put it in as an issue because I'm VDC, and as my role within Barton Mallow, I work, like I said, on all the projects in Virginia. So I'm not up to speed on every individual RFI, every design intent, every conversation that's happened. This may already be addressed somewhere. And so that I don't step on any toes, I made it an issue. We've tracked it. Hasn't gotten resolved. So at this point, and I'm not going to do it to this one because I'm on the wrong one, I actually assign this to my lead PE on site, who's then going to have a conversation with the design team and say, pull this up. I'm probably going to be part of that conversation too. We're going to say, hey, is this intended? No? Okay, great. We're going to push this to an RFI. Be prepared. And 9 times out of 10, we try and make those RFIs a confirming RFI, where it's like, hey, this is the problem. Our intended solution is raise this beam up here, put these verticals there, problem solved. Please confirm this is acceptable. So to the greatest extent possible, we try and do that. But if I come into some of these, let's see. All right, so this was an issue. That's probably not the best one. It's not model-based. It's more drawing-based. Okay, perfect issue. So we have this little canopy connector between these two buildings, right? Nice, keeps people dry, makes total sense. Except for whatever reason, no section was ever cut through the canopy over here. No elevation was ever done of this size of the canopy, so the architect never realized that there's nothing shown there. According to the drawings, this side of the canopy is open air because it just got missed. Oops. That's the kind of thing where we look at it in the model, we go, oh man, there's something weird going on here. I looked at the drawings, the only time it shows up is a single building elevation, and sure enough, the steel's exposed, and it's way in the background. So this is an issue where it's like, hey, we probably need to push this to the design team. This is kind of weird. Please confirm what's going on here. Please provide a section. What are we doing? That sort of a thing. So this is an open issue because we still don't have an answer on this. But I was on site today. I was talking with the project team, the construction project team. And so I assigned it to my guy out there, Dakota. He's got meetings with the owner and design team regularly, so they're going to bring this up, and it'll probably get pushed out to an RFI. You know, if it's something where, you know, for example, I did one in this HVL, we've got this little catwalk area up here that has no door, no access, just a big railing across, and I was like, what's up here? Like, you can't access this. What's going on? There's nothing here. Oops. And they're like, oh, no, that's intended because what's going to happen is people will access from this side, and it's maintenance only, would then have a way of then going across the crane rail to get to the other side. And I went, not my job, but okay, you know, I guess. I don't want to do it. I'm not climbing across a crane at 140 feet off the ground, but somebody's going to do it. Hey, it got thought about. There's already a solution found. I don't need to pursue it anymore. So that issue I was able to just close. It died because it's already been dealt with. So we're able to do all of this within Navisworks and push it back. So if I actually go back to Build, I'm going to go to my issues here. And so like I was looking at issue 14 was a canopy closure. So I've got all this detail here. If I had my model in the right place, it would have taken me to it, things like that. But if I come in here and I go to my issues and I'm going to number 14. Sort by ID number, I can filter it, whatever. And right now it's filtered anyway to ones that are only related to the stuff I was doing, clash, coordination, constructability. And that's one of the other great things we do with this, and part of that data tracking is we put in things like root cause and what kind of issue it is. And that feeds back to some of our data analytics. So if we start seeing that, hey, these design teams, we tend to have a lot of design questions. So we want to maybe give ourselves a little extra time during design or something like that. That's the theoretical way we're going to use that, but it's whatever. It allows us to filter it. That's all I care about. So if I come in here to number 14 here, and this is in Chrome. This is the Build website or ACC website. So this is not inside of Navisworks. I can see all of that exact same information in the same way. You can see here the placement is on that NWD file. Unfortunately, because again that's outside that bubble of ACC, if I click on this, it just opens up the NWD. You've still got to have the issues plugin for Navisworks and then go to the issue itself. Root cause, I mentioned I put that in there. This is another thing I don't like about the Navisworks side, which is that there's no visual that comes across with it. So I end up having to export out a viewpoint as an image, upload it as an image, and attach it. So it's kind of a pain, which is why I haven't really updated the graphic on there, but there's that. And then you can see yesterday, when I was doing some updating, I put a note on there, called out specific sheets, and because I actually called that out, what I really ought to do, and this is my bad, is I should come up here to references, and I should add that there's a reference to, why won't it give me sheets on this one? Probably because I've already located on the NWD. It doesn't want to locate on a sheet. But I could point it to, you know, a PDF version of this A302, but that's not really the best way to do it because they're slightly different than the sheets. Again, I could spend all day talking about this stuff. But if I go to the sheets, I've actually got some in here. I'm going to go to 202. Not the slab edge. So we can see here, this is the second floor plan. It's loaded in as a sheet. So again, if you're not used to BIM360 and Build, this basically replaces Bluebeam or Adobe Acrobat or whatever you've been using for accessing your drawings. It's all through here. Some cool benefits of that, we get live linking. So if I click on this, it's going to take me to TSB A504. I still got to zoom into detail too, but at least it gets me to the right sheet. The other thing is things like this. This is a note pertaining to RFI 138 that was done by John Huddle, you know, a month ago. but I've still got all that information. I can actually come in here and pull this RFI up. Takes me straight to the RFI. What's the response? Where's all my details? You know, like I said, all of this stuff is tracked, and it's all in there. So, you know, if we ever needed to go back, we can. And just like I can go from a drawing to an RFI, and this is kind of getting too into the weeds, but I just want to touch on this. If you go to the RFI section, you pull open this RFI, and then you're like, oh, it references this sheet. And this is kind of what I was looking up for that other issue. You can click on that. It takes you to that sheet. And now you're like, okay, well, which one of these markups is it? Luckily, this sheet doesn't have a lot of markups. So it's pretty easy. So it's two-way communication. But these Ds on here, these are actually design issues that I pointed out. So like in this case, it's a duplicate room number. Not the end of the world, confusing. Revit should have called them on that. But it is what it is. They just need to tell us, okay, it's 215 instead of 214, whatever. And then again, you can come in here and you can see, you know, its location is tagged to the machine room shop, the 126, which is actually this room. But you tag the room so you can filter by rooms. You can actually, like, if you have somebody like an intern with the time, they can go onto the different drawings and put in a polyline basically for each area saying, this is room 1, this is room 2. But it's per sheet specific, and they have to do each room. There's no real automated way of doing that, which is very unfortunate. I'm hoping, and I wish Matt was here, that they would be able to take the spaces in the rooms from Revit and be able to push that to locations, but we're not there yet. Maybe someday. Things to look forward to, right? And then again, aside from things like it's on this sheet, we can assign a location, we can assign additional information, you know, by this column, you know, southeast corner at the ceiling, whatever, additional information. But one of the other things that we can add is additional references. So whether that's a site photo I took, because if I'm using my phone or my iPad, I can take a photo and immediately link it to this. It can be a submittal, it could be an RFI, it could be just some PDF that's in my file somewhere. It doesn't matter. It's basically attach something to this kind of a thing. This is one of the things where for a lot of the files, really, more so than anything else, it's really one directional. So if I attach a sheet to this, like a PDF or something like that, if I go to that PDF in my files, it's not going to tell me to link to this issue necessarily. So yeah, there's that. But at the same time, you're more likely to go to the issue. So there's that. And then here, again, here's all that activity log. You can see when it was done, what notes were added, like literally every time something changed, it's on here. So you can see it was, you know, really just from the time it started till it finished was like a minute and a half. So it's not really all that long. But, you know, if there's some that are more complex, you start getting coordination meeting or conversations happening back and forth, and it may get a little bit longer. This one's a perfect example. This is a chemical storage room. 3 out of the 4 walls are fire rated. The south one isn't. Well, it's storage room to storage room. I guess technically it doesn't need to be, but chem storage is usually considered more of a hazardous material, so it probably needs to be. So this is something we need to have a conversation on. So this is a perfect example of something that falls under an issue and not an RFI. Maybe we have a conversation. The architect says, oh yeah, we know that. We've checked it. We're cool. It meets AHJ requirements. Nobody's going to have a problem with it. Okay, closed. I'm happy. I don't care. I'm just pointing out a weird thing. That's my job. So that's kind of the idea with the issues and kind of how we're using them in the design side. So now that we're getting to, we've got the owner, or we've got the subs on board, we're starting to get to the trade coordination part of it. Like I said, a lot of these issues are getting pushed from the design team responsible to trade coordination. You know, maybe it's hey, this is a tight area we need to watch out for, or this is an exposed pipe we need to reroute. That kind of stuff we can push to the trade coordination, and through shop drawing approvals and you know, less formal means than an RFI, we can get an answer to that. So that allows them to kind of continue to move forward. We're still tracking these issues. We still have follow through on them, but now we're able to kind of shift the workflow from a design-based to a trade-based, which then, of course, is they're working through coordination. They're going to do their submittals and their shop drawings and stuff like that. And ideally, we have the design team in Build. Unfortunately, in this project, they're fighting us. They won't join us, which is crazy because the way our contract is written with Autodesk, it's cost of project based for us to do Build. We can have unlimited users, so there's really no reason for us not to have everybody in there. But that's outside of my hands. If they were in here, we would be able to have much more instantaneous communication, more fluid communication. As it is right now, basically, internally within Barton Mallow, we use this. With our subs, we use it. With the owner, we use it. For most of our owners anyway. But for this architect, they're like, nope, we don't want to see it. Not going to touch it. So obviously, we're outside the bubble now. We've got extra work to do to export PDFs or whatever. There's still lots of great tools within Build to do that. You can RFI log, you filter it, you hit export, here's your PDF RFI log. You're done. So there's still some efficiencies to it, but it would be more efficient if everyone's on the platform, for sure. So if you have an opportunity to join a project, I've got a sandbox project, we call them, which is a demo project. I'm more than happy to add some people to that so you can kind of play around in a totally I'm not going to mess anybody up kind of a way. I've also got a couple, or I've got a training site that I'm going to send you guys a link to here in a minute. It's our internal training that we offer to subs, to owners, to design teams, whomever on our projects. And most of it's Autodesk-based. We've just copied their videos or linked to them, but it's set up with our workflows. We've got a few videos that are very much our workflow specific, so they tie in to a lot of this stuff I've been talking here. So I'll send you guys a link to that. There's no cost to it. There's no obligation. There's nothing. You have to sign up with your name and email, and that's more so we can track it for our actual project teams than it is for anything else. But if you want to, that's another opportunity, totally free. You can get on there, self-directed learning. There's some little quizzes, stuff like that. But it gives you an opportunity to kind of, play around with it without having to go through your reseller or through a live project. So definitely want to do that. I apologize. I know we're getting real close on time here, but there are two other last little things I wanted to talk about. I kind of talked about asset tracking a bit and how we're kind of using some of that. But it's got a lot of really good potential. It's one of the newer tools, so we haven't used it a lot yet. But I've got some real good vibes about that. The last thing I want to talk about is the actual closeout. And we've got some features within that. I'm trying to remember now exactly where it's at. I think it's under settings. Again, we're starting to see more clients who are BIM savvy, technology savvy, and so they're starting to require more handoff information. And even if they're not, a lot of times we've got a standard that we go to that's typically higher than a lot of our owners. But again, the idea is with all of this, the more you're inside that bubble, their Autodesk and even if not Autodesk, Pipe closeout, PYPE, is working on basically taking all of this data and being able to then easily hand that over to the client. Obviously, every client's different. The way they're using their tools is different. That whole transition is going to be a little bit of a mess for every client and every project and whatever. But certainly people like Sid and those owners reps who are the more tech-savvy people can hopefully kind of get ahead of that and figure out maybe it's a template, maybe it's a process, whatever. But I think that's going to be something that as we move forward with ACC, we're going to see a bit more progress in that interoperability between the different products and stuff like that. All right. So with that, I'm going to leave you guys with a QR code for a laugh. I'm kind of glad Matt's not on for this one because it's a not Autodesk thing. It's a few years old, but it's hilarious. And if you've used Autodesk software, you'll totally get it. So there's that to have a little fun with. Any last questions? Anything like that you guys want to talk about?
I was curious because once you started talking about closeout, do you do your punch lists in this system too?
Yeah. So we've tried a couple of different systems for that. And the best one that I found, it really kind of depends on the project team, first of all, how you want to do it. Because one of the biggest concerns I've had from project teams is like, each different person doing a punch is going to maybe put their punch items in a different spot. So, the architect's going to use the architectural sheets. The MEP engineer is going to use the MEP sheets to place their pins. And that's how we do it. We use issues for them because they are issues. It's an issue that needs to be resolved. So the issues are incredibly flexible. And then again, it's got all that tracking and data and everything we can put into it. So, in terms of like what data they want to see, that's totally customizable. We can even create custom fields if that's what they want. But from a process standpoint, the harder part is finding all of those issues and seeing them in a plan together. So for some of our projects, what I've suggested and they've found really useful is to have like, here's a floor plan for this area, and everyone doing a punch will point their issues to that sheet. That way you can just pull up that one punch list sheet, and you can see all of the different issues in an area. And then again, you can filter and sort and all that kind of jazz, but then you're not having to jump between, 5 or 6 different sheets for issues that are in the same space. So that's really the biggest issue.
Can you then create reports and summaries? I mean, I'm doing punch lists in Bluebeam right now, so I hear what you're saying. We're entering each discipline puts their items on their sheets, and then I can issue the PDFs, but I can also do summaries or tables, based on whatever order I can filter out any which way. I'm presuming you can do the same thing then.
Yep. So what you do is inside of the issues section, you filter it to just what you want. And again, that's where things like the type, the status, the root cause, things like that could be very helpful. Or by sheet. Again, if you have that single sheet, everyone's putting their punch on one sheet, then you can just go to that sheet and do it. But once I filter down, I can just do an export. I want a detailed report as a PDF. Boom. It's going to automatically email me as soon as it's done. I can send it to the team. I can do whatever I need to do with this. But this is basically my punch log. And it takes a minute because it's got to do it in the background. But because I did it detailed, all of my notes, all of my photos, comments, locations, all of that data is going to be in there as one big PDF. There's not a lot of options in terms of how you customize what it looks like, which is unfortunate. But you can, so long as you do your filter first, that just determines what you're going to see on it.